The Grand Chamber of Arbitration stood as a monument to power. Its walls stretched high into the dome above, made from living crystal that glowed with soft purple light. Ambassador Kyle Morrison walked across the polished floor, his footsteps echoing in the vast space. Around him, alien dignitaries watched from their elevated seats. Most of them looked down at him with expressions that ranged from curiosity to barely hidden contempt. Kyle had been a diplomat for 20 years. He had negotiated trade agreements, settled disputes, and built relationships with dozens of alien species. But today was different. Today, the Valtheron Empire had summoned him to answer for crimes humanity had supposedly committed. The Valtherans were giants among the galaxy's powers. Their empire stretched across 100 worlds. Their fleets numbered in the tens of thousands. They had ruled this part of space for 3,000 years, longer than human civilization had existed. When humanity first ventured beyond Earth's solar system 50 years ago, the Valtherans had classified them as a developing species. It was a polite way of saying humans were inferior and needed guidance. High Arbiter Genthor sat at the center of the chamber. He was massive, standing at least 3 meters tall when he rose to his full height. His skin shimmered with colors that changed based on his mood. Right now, it pulsed with deep purple and gold, the colors of authority and judgment. Ambassador Morrison, Genthor's voice boomed through the chamber. Translation implants in Kyle's ear converted the alien speech into English. The tribunal has reviewed the incident at Kepler Station. The evidence is clear. Your research vessel violated restricted Imperial space. When our patrol attempted to enforce the law, your vessel opened fire. 3 Valtheron officers were injured. Kyle kept his face calm, but inside his mind was racing. He had reviewed the sensor logs 100 times. The truth was completely different from what Genthor described. The human research vessel had been studying a nebula at the edge of human territory. The Valtheron patrol had crossed into that territory without warning and fired first when the research ship tried to flee. High Arbiter, Kyle said, keeping his voice steady. We have provided complete sensor logs that show a different sequence of events. Our vessel was in human space when your patrol arrived. We did not fire first. Genthor's skin flashed red for a moment. Anger. Your logs are clearly falsified. The tribunal has ruled on this matter. The Human Confederation will pay 10 million standard credits in reparations. Furthermore, humanity will cease all military activities in Sector 447. You will also submit all your vessel designs for Imperial review and approval. Around the chamber, representatives from other species made sounds of approval. Some clicked their mandibles, others whistled through breathing holes. A few nodded with multiple heads. Kyle recognized what was happening. This was not about justice. This was about control. The Valtheron Empire had perfected a strategy over centuries. They would find or create an incident with a younger species. Then they would demand reparations and restrictions. The species, faced with the Empire's overwhelming military power, would accept. Slowly, over years or decades, the restrictions would increase. Eventually, the species would become a tributary state, nominally independent but actually controlled by the Empire. 17 other species had fallen into this trap. Kyle had studied each case during his preparation for this assignment. He knew the pattern. He knew what came next. The question was whether humanity would follow the same path. Those demands are unacceptable, Kyle said clearly. The chamber fell silent. Several alien representatives turned to stare at him with whatever sensory organs they possessed. No one spoke to the High Arbiter like that. No one refused the tribunal's ruling. Genthor slowly rose to his full height. His skin shifted through several colors before settling on deep crimson. Ambassador Morrison, perhaps you do not understand the situation. This tribunal speaks with the full authority of the Valtheron Empire. Our rulings are final. Species that refuse to comply face severe consequences. I understand perfectly, High Arbiter. Kyle took a step forward. His security detail, 2 human Marines in dress uniforms, tensed slightly but did not move. What you call a ruling, I call an ultimatum. What you call justice, I call manufactured provocation. This is the third incident in 3 months. Each time, the pattern is the same. Your forces enter our territory, create a confrontation, and then demand concessions. You dare accuse the Empire of deception? Genthor's voice rose. I accuse the Empire of following a pattern that has worked for you many times before. You identify a species you consider weak. You test them. You push them. And when they push back, you crush them under legal frameworks and military threats. It is efficient. It is effective. And it has worked for 3,000 years. The chamber erupted in noise. Aliens spoke over each other in dozens of languages. Some sounded outraged. Others seemed intrigued. The High Arbiter raised one massive hand, and the chamber fell silent again. So the humans believe they have discovered our secret methods? Genthor's tone was mocking. You think you are the first to notice these patterns? Let me educate you, Ambassador. Yes, we test species. Yes, we push them. We do this because the galaxy is a dangerous place. Only strong species survive. Only disciplined species prosper. The Empire brings order and stability. Those who accept our guidance thrive. Those who resist are removed from the equation. Kyle nodded slowly. Thank you for your honesty, High Arbiter. Now let me be equally honest with you. What you are demanding is not guidance. It is submission. You want humanity to give up our sovereignty, cripple our defenses, and place ourselves at your mercy. You believe we will accept because we are young and outnumbered. You believe we think like the other species you have absorbed. And you do not? Genthor leaned forward. No, we do not. Kyle's voice remained calm, but it carried through the entire chamber. The Human Confederation rejects your demands. We reject your authority over our territory. We reject the premise of this tribunal. And we reject the assumption that humanity will follow the path you have laid out for us. Then you choose war. Genthor's skin had gone almost black now, a color Kyle had never seen before. Pure rage. No, High Arbiter. We choose freedom. But I need you to understand something before this goes any further. Your actions here today, your demands, your threats, they have ignited uncharted consequences. I urge you to reconsider your position. I urge you to step back and think carefully about what happens next. Are you threatening the Valtheron Empire? Genthor's voice was quiet now, dangerous. I am warning you, Kyle said. There is a difference. A threat implies I want conflict. A warning means I am trying to prevent it. I am telling you as clearly as I can that you do not understand what you are dealing with. Humanity is not like the other species you have faced. Our history is different. Our psychology is different. And if you push us into a corner, you will discover just how different we are. Genthor stared at Kyle for a long moment. Then he gestured to his attendants. This audience is over. Ambassador Morrison, you have 48 hours to reconsider your position. After that, the Empire will take appropriate action to ensure compliance with tribunal rulings. Kyle bowed slightly, a gesture of respect but not submission. I will. The intelligence briefing room on Valtheron Prime was cold and sterile. Admiral Kethron stood before a massive holographic display that showed the entire sector. Red markers indicated Valtheron military assets. Blue markers showed human positions. The blue markers were multiplying. This cannot be accurate, Kethron said, his skin shifting to uncertain yellow. Our last intelligence report placed human military strength at 200 vessels, maximum. This shows thousands. Intelligence Director Velthus manipulated the display with practiced ease. More blue markers appeared. The data is confirmed through multiple sources. In the past 24 hours, the humans have mobilized 3,000 vessels across 9 star systems. They are taking up defensive positions around every human colony. 3,000 ships. Kethron felt something he had not experienced in decades of military service. Doubt. Where did they come from? How did we miss this? We did not miss them, Admiral. They did not exist until recently. Our analysis suggests the humans have retrofitted civilian vessels with military hardware. Cargo haulers, mining ships, even passenger transports. They have turned their entire merchant fleet into a military force. Kethron studied the display. The Valtheron fleet was larger, better armed, better trained. But the human numbers were staggering. Can they fight effectively? A cargo ship with weapons is not a warship. Unknown. We have no combat data on these modified vessels. However, our analysts note several concerning factors. The humans are maintaining perfect formation discipline. Their communication security is exceptional, and they are deploying in patterns that suggest sophisticated tactical planning. On Earth, Fleet Commander Jacob Hayes sat in a similar briefing room deep beneath Geneva's mountains. Unlike the Valtheron facility, this one buzzed with activity. Officers moved between stations. Holographic displays showed real-time data from every human fleet position. Communication channels carried reports from dozens of systems. Captain Lisa Grant stood beside Jacob, reviewing status reports on her tablet. All fleets report ready status. The Valtherans have not moved beyond their initial staging area, but long-range sensors show they are bringing in reinforcements. We count 700 capital ships now, with more arriving every hour. Expected, Jacob said calmly. He was a veteran of humanity's early days in space, back when pirates and raiders had taught humans hard lessons about galactic violence. Those lessons had shaped everything that followed. They want to intimidate us, show overwhelming force, make us reconsider. Will we? Lisa asked. Jacob smiled without humor. No, but they don't know that yet. Status on Operation Cascade? Lieutenant Commander Ben Shaw looked up from his station. All kinetic launch platforms are armed and targeted. We have firing solutions for 2,300 priority targets across Valtheron space. Civilian casualties are projected at less than 1% if we stick to the primary target list. And the special packages? Ready for deployment on your order, though I still think using them is insane. Insanity is what we are counting on, Jacob replied. The Valtherans think in terms of fleet battles and occupation. They have never faced an enemy willing to trade infrastructure for freedom. They have never fought someone who thinks 3 moves ahead. Back on Valtheron Prime, Ambassador Kyle Morrison sat in his office at the Human Embassy. The building was surrounded by Valtheron security forces now. Not enough to be an overt threat, but enough to make a point. Kyle had expected this. Everything was proceeding according to the plan he and others had developed over years of careful preparation. His communication console chimed. Ambassador, High Arbiter Genthor is here. He is demanding to see you immediately. Kyle checked his appearance in a mirror, straightened his tie, and nodded. Send him in. Genthor entered without waiting for formal invitation. His massive frame filled the doorway. His skin flashed angry red and orange. Morrison, you need to call off your fleets immediately. This provocation will not be tolerated. High Arbiter, please sit. Kyle gestured to a reinforced chair designed for Valtheron physiology. Or stand, if you prefer. But let us talk calmly. There is nothing calm about this situation. You have mobilized your entire military force. You have positioned them in aggressive formations. This is an act of war. Is it? Kyle walked to the window overlooking the capital city. The view was spectacular, towers of living crystal reaching toward a lavender sky. I believe we are simply conducting routine military exercises within our own territory. Surely the Empire does not object to our internal operations. Genthor's skin flashed darker. Do not play word games with me. We both know what this is. Your government is responding to the Tribunal's ruling with military threats. It will not work. The Empire has crushed rebellions that lasted for decades. We have rendered entire species extinct when they refuse to see reason. Your people could be gone within a month if we chose to make it so. Kyle turned from the window. That is probably true. Your fleet could destroy every human world before we could stop you. The Empire's military might is undeniable. But High Arbiter, you are missing the critical question. Which is? What would it cost you? Genthor paused. Explain. Let us be honest with each other. You came here to intimidate me. You want me to panic, to call my government and beg them to back down. You want humanity to follow the pattern you have established with 17 other species. Submit now, or be destroyed later. Am I wrong? You are not wrong. That is exactly what will happen. Then let me tell you what you do not know. Kyle sat down at his desk and pulled up a holographic display. The Empire has fought many wars. You have defeated countless enemies. But you have never fought humanity. You have never faced a species that spent 10,000 years at war with itself. Ancient history is irrelevant, is it? Let me educate you about humans, High Arbiter. We are not like other species. We did not evolve to cooperate naturally. We evolved as tribes, as nations, as groups that competed violently for resources. For most of our history, we were at war. Not occasional war, constant war. We developed weapons that could destroy our entire planet. We came within minutes of using them, multiple times. Genthor's skin shifted to uncertain yellow again. Yet you survive. You have been at peace for a century. We have been at peace with ourselves, Kyle corrected. But we never forgot the lessons we learned. We spent that century preparing for the day when someone from the stars decided we looked weak. Someone like you. Preparation means nothing against overwhelming force. Kyle smiled. Does it not? Tell me, High Arbiter, what do you know about asymmetric warfare, about insurgency, about guerrilla tactics, about the kind of total war where every civilian becomes a soldier and every building becomes a fortress? We know about such things. We have dealt with insurgencies before. No, Kyle said quietly. You have dealt with species trying to survive. You have never dealt with a species willing to burn everything to remain free. There is a difference. Genthor was silent for a moment. You are bluffing. Am I? Then test me. Order your fleet to attack New Portland. See what happens. I will tell you now. You will destroy our defending ships. You will kill millions of humans, and then you will discover that was just the beginning. The beginning of what? Kyle leaned forward. The beginning of a war that you cannot win. Not because you lack firepower, but because you lack the willingness to pay the price. Every human world has kinetic launchers now. Every colony has strategic weapons hidden in asteroid fields. Every ship, military or civilian, can be turned into a missile. You can destroy us, High Arbiter. But we can hurt you in ways you have never experienced. We can make the cost of conquering humanity exceed any possible benefit. You would condemn your own species to extinction rather than accept reasonable terms? There is nothing reasonable about slavery. And yes, we would. Because humans learned something during our long, bloody history. There are things worse than death. We learned that lesson in wars that killed millions, in conflicts that lasted generations, in struggles where the very concept of victory became meaningless except in terms of survival. Genthor stared at Kyle for a long time. His skin cycled through colors, reflecting his inner turmoil. Finally, he spoke. What do you want? What I said in the Grand Chamber. Recognition of human sovereignty. The establishment of neutral zones. The right to defend ourselves without imperial interference. And most importantly, an agreement that humanity will never be treated as a tributary state. The Empire does not negotiate with inferior species. Then the Empire is about to learn a very expensive lesson about Unadmiral Kethron stood on the bridge of the Eternal Dominion, the flagship of the Valtheron Third Fleet. Around him, 500 warships held formation in perfect symmetry. Each vessel represented the pinnacle of Imperial engineering. Each carried enough firepower to level a city. Together, they represented power that had been unmatched in this part of space for millennia. All ships report ready, Admiral, Tactical Officer Renthos announced. His skin glowed with confident gold. Jump drives are charged. Defensive shields are at maximum. All weapon systems are armed and locked. Kethron reviewed the mission parameters one final time. The orders from Valtheron Prime were clear. Jump to the New Portland system. Establish orbital superiority. Force the human defenders to surrender or destroy them. Then, present the human government with a simple choice. Submit or watch their colonies burn one by one. Begin jump sequence, Kethron ordered. Target coordinates. New Portland system. Human colonial space. The bridge hummed with energy as the massive drives activated. Space folded in ways that violated normal physics. The fleet disappeared from its staging area and reappeared 3 light-years away at the edge of the New Portland system. Immediately, alarms began to sound across the bridge. "Tactical report," Kethron demanded. Renthos worked frantically at his station. His skin had gone pale. "Admiral, I am detecting 437 human vessels in defensive formation around the planet. All armed. All with active shield generators. All in combat-ready status. That is impossible. Intelligence reported no more than 20 ships in this entire sector. The sensors do not lie, Admiral. They are there." Kethron pulled up the tactical display. The blue markers representing human ships surrounded the planet like a protective shell. The formation was sophisticated, layered with overlapping fields of fire. This was not a hastily assembled defense. This had been planned. On the bridge of the human vessel, Liberty's Dawn, Commander Julie Price watched the Valtheron fleet materialize on her sensors. She had been waiting for this moment, preparing for it, training her crew for months. Now it was finally here. "All ships, this is Liberty Actual," she spoke into the fleet-wide channel. "The Valtherans have arrived. Remember your training, stay calm, trust your systems, and most importantly, trust each other." Her executive officer, Lieutenant Alan Ross, managed the weapons board. "All batteries reporting ready. Kinetic accelerators are charged. Missile boats are standing by with full loads. The special package is ready if we need it." Julie studied the enemy formation. 500 ships, each one larger and more powerful than any human vessel. In a straight fight, the Valtherans would win. But humanity had no intention of fighting straight. "Open a channel to the Valtheron flagship." Moments later, Admiral Kethron's face appeared on the main screen. The translator rendered his words into flat English. "Human vessel, you are interfering with Imperial enforcement operations. Disperse your fleet immediately, or you will be destroyed." Julie kept her expression neutral. "Admiral, you are currently in human territorial space with a hostile fleet. You have not requested permission to enter. You have not stated peaceful intentions. Under the laws of space warfare, which your empire helped write, we are justified in treating you as an invading force. You have 1 minute to begin jump procedures back to neutral space, or we will assume hostile intent." "You cannot be serious." Kethron's skin flashed with disbelief. "You are outnumbered. Even if every ship you have is combat capable, which I doubt, we have superior firepower and superior training. This is not a fight you can win." "Count again, Admiral." Kethron glanced at his tactical display and felt his confidence crack. The number of human ships was increasing, not through new arrivals. The increase came from vessels that had been hiding, using stealth technology to mask their presence. 600 human ships. 700. 800. The numbers kept climbing. "What is this?" Kethron demanded. "This is humanity defending its home, Admiral. Did you really think we would leave our colonies unprotected? Did you really believe your intelligence reports that claimed we only had a handful of warships? These are civilian vessels, modified cargo ships and transports. They cannot stand against military warships." Julie smiled without warmth. "Perhaps. Perhaps not. There is only one way to find out. Are you willing to test that theory, Admiral? Are you willing to order your fleet into combat against 800 and rising vessels, knowing that even if you win, your casualties will be severe?" Kethron said nothing. His tactical officer was providing constant updates. The human fleet now numbered 900 ships. The formations were tight, professional, betraying a level of coordination that civilian vessels should not possess. 30 seconds, Admiral, Julie said. "Then we will consider you hostile, and if we consider you hostile, we will act accordingly." "You are bluffing," Kethron said, but his skin had turned uncertain yellow. "Try me." The seconds ticked by. Kethron watched his tactical display, his mind racing through scenarios. A fleet engagement here would result in victory, but at what cost? Losing even 50 ships would be a disaster. Losing 100 would require explaining to the Imperial Council why he had been so reckless. "All ships, hold position," he ordered. "Do not fire. Maintain defensive posture." "A wise choice, Admiral." Julie relaxed slightly. Now, let us talk like rational beings. You came here to force our surrender. That is not going to happen. What happens next depends on your next actions. Before Kethron could respond, new alarms erupted across his bridge. Admiral, we are detecting weapons fire from the human fleet. Where? What are they targeting? Not targeting us, sir. They are firing mass driver rounds into deep space, multiple vectors. The rounds are traveling at 0.98 light speed. Kethron pulled up the trajectory data. His skin went ashen gray as he processed what he was seeing. The humans were not shooting at his fleet. They were shooting at targets throughout Valtheron space. Automated factories, orbital shipyards, communication relay stations, power generation facilities. The rounds were traveling at near light speed. They would reach their targets in hours or days, depending on distance, and there was no way to intercept something moving that fast. How many rounds? Kethron asked quietly. We count 2,300 individual projectiles, Admiral, all on ballistic trajectories, all aimed at high-value infrastructure targets in Imperial space. Julie's voice came through the communication channel again. Admiral, I suggest you contact your superiors immediately. Those rounds will reach their first targets in approximately 17 hours. Each one carries enough kinetic energy to destroy its target completely. Your empire is about to lose a significant portion of its infrastructure unless you act quickly. This is an act of war, Kethron said. No, Admiral. You committed an act of war when you jumped into our space with hostile intent. We are simply defending ourselves. The question now is whether you want this to continue. What are your demands? They have not changed. Recognition of human sovereignty, establishment of neutral zones, the right to self-defense. Most importantly, a formal treaty that prevents the Empire from ever treating humanity as a tributary state. The Empire does not negotiate with species who attack us. Then the Empire will lose more than just infrastructure. Julie's voice was hard now. Those were just the first wave, Admiral. We can fire again every hour, every day for months. Our industrial base was built for exactly this kind of warfare. Can your Empire say the same? Can you maintain your fleets, your colonies, your whole civilization while we systematically destroy every piece of unmanned infrastructure you own? Kethron looked at the tactical display. The human fleet surrounded the planet. The kinetic rounds were already beyond any hope of interception. His own fleet was deep in enemy territory, vulnerable to attack if the situation escalated further. How do we stop the rounds already in flight? He asked. You cannot. Only we can. Each round has a receiver that listens for an abort code. If we transmit that code, the round will self-destruct before impact. But we will only transmit that code after we have a formal ceasefire agreement and confirmation that negotiations have begun. You planned this entire scenario? Yes, Julie admitted. We hoped it would not be necessary. We hoped the Empire would accept peaceful coexistence. But we prepared for the reality that you might not. Humans have a saying, Admiral. Hope for the best, prepare for the worst. Kethron made a decision. I will contact Valtheron Prime, but I cannot guarantee they will negotiate. Then I cannot guarantee we will stop the next wave of kinetic rounds. The choice is yours, Admiral. Peace or mutual destruction. Choose wisely. The communication channel closed. Kethron stood in silence for a moment, then turned to his communication officer. Get me the Supreme Arbiter. Highest priority. Tell them we have a situation that requires immediate attention at the highest level of government. As the message went out, Kethron looked at the tactical display one more time. The emergency session of the Imperial Council began at midnight, Valtheron Prime Time. The council chamber was smaller than the Grand Chamber of Arbitration, designed for serious discussions rather than public spectacle. 12 council members sat in a circle around the Supreme Arbiter, their skin colors reflecting various states of agitation and concern. High Arbiter Genthor stood in the center, presenting the situation. Holographic displays showed the trajectories of human kinetic rounds spreading across Valtheron space like a deadly web. Each line represented potential destruction. Each target represented years of investment and development. How did we miss this? Demanded Council Member Thelvis. Her skin pulsed angry orange. Our intelligence reports claimed humans were technologically inferior. They said human military capacity was limited. Yet here we are, facing a threat we never anticipated. We underestimated them, Genthor admitted. The words were difficult for him. The Empire did not make mistakes. The Empire did not fail to anticipate threats. Our analysts focused on military fleet strength. We counted warships. We measured firepower. We assumed humans would think like us, that they would prepare for fleet battles and orbital combat. Instead, prompted the Supreme Arbiter, the ancient being sat perfectly still, their translucent skin revealing the network of vessels beneath. Instead, they turned their entire industrial infrastructure into a weapons platform. Every mining operation, every cargo hauler, every civilian facility was designed with dual purpose. They can operate as normal commerce, or they can become weapons at a moment's notice. It is elegant and terrifying. Intelligence Director Velthus added to the briefing. Our analysis of human history shows a pattern we failed to recognize. They are the only known species that nearly destroyed itself multiple times and chose to step back. Their wars were not about territory or resources alone. They fought over ideas, beliefs, principles. And they fought with a totality that other species cannot match. What does that mean for us? Asked another council member. It means they are willing to accept losses that would break any other species. It means they prepare for worst-case scenarios as standard procedure. And it means when they issue warnings, they have already planned for every possible response we might make. The Supreme Arbiter spoke, their voice barely above a whisper but commanding absolute attention. What are our options? Military response, suggested one council member. Show them the full might of the Empire. Destroy their colonies one by one until they submit. Genthor shook his head. That would result in our victory, but at catastrophic cost. They have kinetic launchers hidden throughout their territory. For every colony we destroy, they can take out dozens of our facilities. The economic damage would take decades to repair. Can we intercept the kinetic rounds already in flight? No, they are traveling too fast and there are too many. We could stop perhaps 10% if we diverted every available ship. The rest will hit their targets. What about the targets themselves? Can we evacuate them? Velthus manipulated the holographic display. Most of the targets are unmanned facilities, automated factories, power stations, relay satellites. The humans deliberately chose targets that would cripple our infrastructure without causing mass casualties. It is strategic brilliance, actually. They remove moral arguments against their actions while still inflicting severe damage. Then we negotiate, the Supreme Arbiter decided. Several council members objected immediately. The Empire does not negotiate with inferior species. If we do this, every tributary state will see it as weakness. We will face rebellions across the Empire. We already face that possibility, the Supreme Arbiter replied. The humans have exposed a fundamental flaw in our approach. We assumed overwhelming force would always be sufficient. We never planned for an opponent who would trade infrastructure for freedom, who would accept terrible costs rather than submit. Genthor felt a strange mixture of respect and fear. Ambassador Morrison tried to warn us. He said we were dealing with uncharted consequences. I thought he was bluffing. Humans do not bluff, Velthus said quietly. That is another thing our analysts missed. Their culture values direct communication in conflict situations. When they warn you, they mean it. When they threaten you, they have already prepared to follow through. On Earth, Fleet Commander Jacob Hayes watched similar displays in the command center beneath Geneva. The kinetic rounds were on course, spreading through space at velocities that made them essentially unstoppable. Around him, officers monitored communication channels, waiting for the Valtheron response. Captain Lisa Grant approached with a status update. All fleets remain in defensive positions. The Valtheron 3rd Fleet at New Portland has not moved. Long-range sensors show significant communication traffic between them and Valtheron Prime. They are trying to decide what to do, Jacob observed. The question is whether their pride or their pragmatism wins. What if they choose total war? Jacob had thought about this scenario many times. Then we hurt them badly enough that they reconsider. We cannot win a conventional war, but we can make the cost unbearable. Every human colony has evacuation plans. Every ship has coordinates for fallback positions. We can fight a long war if we have to. Lieutenant Commander Ben Shaw looked up from his station. Incoming communication from Valtheran Prime. They are requesting a direct channel to Ambassador Morrison. Patch it through to Kyle's office and get me a live feed. I want to hear what they say. In his office on Valtheran Prime, Kyle Morrison accepted the communication request. He expected High Arbiter Genthor or perhaps Admiral Kethron. Instead, the face that appeared on his screen was that of the Supreme Arbiter themselves, an honor rarely granted to any species. Ambassador Morrison, the Supreme Arbiter's voice was calm, showing no hint of the crisis that must be consuming the Imperial government. You have our attention, Supreme Arbiter. Kyle stood, offering the gesture of respect that protocol demanded. I wish we could have achieved this through less dramatic means. As do I. However, circumstances are what they are. You have attacked Imperial infrastructure. You have threatened our economic stability, and you have done so with a precision that suggests careful planning. Tell me, Ambassador, how long have you been preparing for this? Kyle considered lying but decided on honesty. Since first contact, we studied the Empire's history. We analyzed your methods. We identified the pattern you follow with developing species. And we made a decision that humanity would not follow that pattern. By preparing for war. By preparing to defend ourselves. There is a difference, Supreme Arbiter. We do not want your territory. We do not seek to conquer your worlds. We simply refuse to be conquered ourselves. The Empire brings order and stability to the galaxy. The Empire brings submission dressed up as order. You absorb species, strip them of independence, and call it civilization. 17 species before us accepted that fate. We will not be the 18th. The Supreme Arbiter was silent for a moment. What do you want, Ambassador Morrison? Peace. Recognition of human sovereignty. A formal treaty that establishes neutral zones and prevents future incidents. Most importantly, an agreement that humanity will never be classified as a tributary state or subject to imperial authority. And in exchange, we transmit the abort codes for the kinetic rounds. We withdraw our fleets to defensive positions. We establish diplomatic relations based on mutual respect rather than dominance and submission. You ask us to change policies that have stood for 3,000 years. Kyle nodded. I ask you to recognize that the galaxy is changing. You cannot assume every species will submit to superior force. Some species, like humanity, would rather burn than kneel. The question is whether you want to fight that reality or accept it. If we refuse, then those kinetic rounds hit their targets in less than 17 hours. Then we fire another wave. And another. And we keep firing until either you agree to negotiate or until we have crippled your infrastructure so badly that you cannot maintain your empire. We will lose this war eventually, Supreme Arbiter. But you will lose far more than you gain by winning it. The Supreme Arbiter's skin shifted through several colors, a sign of deep thought. You are a very dangerous species, Ambassador Morrison. We are a determined species. There is a difference. Very well. I will order Admiral Kethron to withdraw from New Portland. I will establish a diplomatic committee to negotiate the terms you propose. But understand this, humanity will be judged by how you conduct yourself in the years ahead. If you prove to be aggressive expansionists, the Empire will respond accordingly. That is fair. Judge us by our actions, not by your assumptions. That is all we ask. Transmit the abort codes, Ambassador. Kyle nodded and signaled to his communication officer. Within seconds, the codes went out on all frequencies. Throughout Valtheran space, receivers on kinetic rounds detected the signal. Explosive charges detonated, turning deadly projectiles into harmless debris. The codes are transmitted, Kyle confirmed. No rounds will impact their targets. You have my word. Your word means little to me yet, Ambassador. But it is a beginning. We will continue this conversation tomorrow. For now, I must deal with my council and convince them that negotiation is wiser than pride. The communication ended. Kyle sat back in his chair, suddenly exhausted. The crisis had passed, but the real work was just beginning. Building a lasting peace would be harder than preparing for war. The negotiations took 3 months. They were held on a newly constructed station at the exact midpoint between human and Valtheron space. The station itself became a symbol of the changing relationship between the two powers. Human and Valtheron engineers worked side by side to build it, learning to communicate across the vast differences in their cultures and methods. Ambassador Kyle Morrison walked through the station's central corridor, observing the mixture of architectural styles. Human functional design met Valtheron artistic grandeur in ways that should not have worked but somehow did. Diplomats from dozens of species moved through the corridors, all watching to see what precedent would be established here. The negotiations were exhausting. Every point had to be argued, refined, and argued again. The Valtheron Empire wanted face-saving measures, ways to maintain the appearance of superiority, even as they granted humanity the independence they demanded. Human negotiators pushed for concrete protections, written guarantees that could not be reinterpreted later. High Arbiter Genthor led the Valtheron delegation. Over the weeks, Kyle watched the massive aliens' attitude shift from hostility to grudging respect. They sat across from each other now in a conference room with windows showing the nebula outside, reviewing the final draft of what would become the Treaty of the Neutral Stars. Article 7 still troubles me, Genthor said, his skin showing contemplative blue. It grants humans the right to maintain military forces without imperial oversight. This sets a dangerous precedent. Dangerous for whom? Kyle asked. For the empire that wants to control every species it encounters? Yes, it is dangerous for that approach. But for genuine peace and coexistence, this is essential. You cannot claim to respect our sovereignty while demanding we submit our defenses for your approval. Other species will demand the same rights. Perhaps they should have them. Perhaps the Empire's model of forced integration is the real problem. Genthor's skin flashed irritated orange, but he controlled it quickly. You understand this treaty changes everything. 3,000 years of imperial policy will be overturned. Then perhaps it is time for new policies. The galaxy is not static, High Arbiter. Species evolve, technology advances, old assumptions become obsolete. The Empire can either adapt or it can stagnate. Which do you prefer? I prefer stability. Stability built on fear is not real stability. It is just delayed conflict. What we are building here, if we can make it work, is stability built on mutual interest that lasts much longer. They continued working through the document, clause by clause. The treaty established neutral zones where neither power could maintain military forces. It created diplomatic protocols for resolving disputes. Most importantly, it formally recognized humanity as an independent sovereign power with all rights and responsibilities that implied. Elsewhere on the station, Admiral Kethron met with Fleet Commander Jacob Hayes in a less formal setting. They sat in an observation lounge overlooking the construction docks where both human and Valtheron ships were being built. A bottle of human whiskey sat on the table between them. Your people drink this regularly, Kethron asked, his translation implant making his skepticism clear even across species. Some do. It is an acquired taste. Jacob poured 2 glasses. My grandfather introduced me to it. He said important conversations required good whiskey. Kethron sampled the liquid cautiously. His biology was different enough that alcohol affected him differently, but he could appreciate the burn. We came very close to war, Commander Hayes. We did. Closer than most people realize. If my fleet had attacked at New Portland, what would have happened? Jacob considered the question carefully. We would have lost that battle. Your fleet was superior in every measurable way. But then our kinetic rounds would have started hitting their targets throughout your space. Your empire would have responded by attacking more human colonies. We would have continued our attacks on your infrastructure. The war would have escalated until one side collapsed economically. Which side would have collapsed first? Probably us. But the cost to the empire would have been devastating. You would have won a Pyrrhic victory, as we say. A victory so costly that it might as well be a defeat. Kethron's skin shifted through several colors. You plan to lose? We plan to make winning too expensive. There is a difference. Wars are not just about who has more ships or bigger weapons. They are about will, endurance, and cost tolerance. We knew we could not match your military strength. But we also knew we could hurt you badly enough that the war would not be worth fighting. That is a terrifying way to think about conflict. It is a human way to think about it. We have fought wars where both sides lost more than they could ever have gained by winning. We have seen civilizations destroy themselves pursuing victory. Those lessons shaped how we approach conflict today. Kethron poured himself another drink. I have studied human military history since the crisis began. Your wars are incomprehensible to me. You fight over ideas as much as territory. You accept casualties that would break any Valtheron commander's spirit, and you do it without hesitation when you believe the cause is just. That is accurate, but we also know when to stop fighting, when to negotiate, when to accept peace even if it means compromising on some points. The trick is knowing which battles matter. And this battle? This confrontation between our species? Did it matter? Jacob nodded slowly. More than you know. If humanity had submitted to the Empire, we would have lost something essential to what makes us human. The right to determine our own path. The freedom to make our own mistakes and celebrate our own achievements. That is worth fighting for. That is worth dying for. Even if it meant your species' extinction? Especially then. Because a species that will not fight for its freedom does not deserve to survive. Harsh words, I know. But true. Back in the conference room, Kyle and Genthor had reached the final articles of the treaty. Article 15 addressed the question that hung over everything else. What happened to the other tributary species in the Empire? You cannot force us to release every species under Imperial protection, Genthor argued. Many of them benefit from our guidance. They lack the capability for true independence. Kyle shook his head. That is not your decision to make. If a species wants to remain associated with the Empire, that is their choice. But they must be given a choice. They must have the option to negotiate their own relationship with you, just as we have. This will destabilize the Empire, or it will strengthen it. Species that choose to associate with you will be more loyal than species forced to submit. Willing allies are stronger than reluctant subjects. Genthor was silent for a long moment. Then his skin shifted to a color Kyle had never seen before, a pale green that his cultural database suggested meant acceptance of difficult truth. You are asking us to dismantle an empire built over 3,000 years. No, I am asking you to transform it. From an empire of conquest to an association of willing partners. From dominance to cooperation. The choice is yours, High Arbiter. But know this. Humanity has shown that resistance is possible. Other species are watching. They are learning. The old model is already breaking down. You can manage that transition, or you can fight it. But you cannot stop it. Why do you care what happens to other species? You have secured humanity's independence. Because humans believe in principles, not just interests. We believe intelligent beings have the right to self-determination. We believe forced submission is wrong, no matter who does it or why. And we believe the galaxy will be better, safer, and more prosperous when all species are free to chart their own course. Even if some species chart disastrous courses. Even then, freedom includes the right to make mistakes, the right to fail, the right to learn from those failures and try again. You cannot protect species from themselves by controlling them. You can only stunt their growth. The treaty was finalized 3 days later. The signing ceremony took place in the station's Grand Hall, with representatives from 40 species watching. Cameras broadcast the event across the galaxy. This was not just a treaty between two powers. It was a statement about the future. Kyle signed the human copy with a pen that had belonged to one of Earth's early diplomats, a man who had helped end a great war centuries ago. Genthor marked the Valtheron copy using traditional crystal etching. The Supreme Arbiter witnessed both signatures, lending the full weight of imperial authority to the agreement. The Treaty of the Neutral Stars is now in effect, the Supreme Arbiter announced. Let it stand as a testament to the possibility of peace between different species. Let it demonstrate that strength need not mean domination, and that independence need not mean isolation. After the ceremony, Kyle found a quiet corner of the observation deck. He stood alone, watching the stars and thinking about everything that had led to this moment. The years of preparation, the careful planning, the calculated risks, the moment when he stood in the grand chamber and delivered his warning. "You look tired," a voice said behind him. Jacob Hayes had found him. "I am tired, but it is a good tired. We did something important here." "We showed the galaxy that humans cannot be pushed around," Jacob agreed. "But more than that, we showed them there is another way. The Valtheron model is not the only model. Force is not the only language of diplomacy." 6 months after the treaty signing, the galaxy looked different, not in obvious ways. The same species occupied the same territories, the same trade routes carried the same goods. But something fundamental had shifted in how power was understood and exercised. Ambassador Kyle Morrison sat in his new office on the Neutral Zone Station. He had been appointed as humanity's permanent representative here, overseeing the implementation of the treaty and managing the daily interactions between human and Valtheron interests. The work was less dramatic than the negotiations had been, but in many ways more important. His assistant, a young diplomat named Claire Hudson, brought him the morning reports. 3 more species have requested meetings this week. They want to discuss renegotiating their relationship with the Empire. The Valtheron diplomatic corps is overwhelmed. Kyle reviewed the requests. The species ranged from small colonies to established civilizations that had been tributary states for centuries. All of them had watched how humanity stood up to the Empire. All of them were asking themselves the same question. If humans could demand independence, why couldn't they? "What is High Arbiter Genthor's response?" Kyle asked. "He is granting the meetings. The Imperial Council is not happy about it, but they recognize they do not have much choice. If they refuse to negotiate, they risk rebellions. If they negotiate, they maintain some influence even as they grant more autonomy. That is exactly what we hoped would happen. The Empire is learning that willing partners are better than reluctant subjects." Claire hesitated. "Some people are saying we destabilized the galaxy, that we created chaos where there was order." Kyle looked up at her. "What do you think?" "I think we forced change that was already coming." Species were unhappy under the old system. The Empire kept control through fear and overwhelming force. But that could not last forever. Eventually, someone would have challenged them. It just happened to be us. "Good answer. Remember that when people criticize what we did did not create the problem. We simply exposed it and offered an alternative." Across the station, Admiral Kethron worked in his own office, dealing with a very different set of challenges. He had been assigned to help establish military communication protocols between human and Valtheron forces. The goal was to prevent accidental conflicts and build confidence between 2 militaries that had nearly gone to war. Commander Julie Price from the Liberty's Dawn visited him that morning. They were reviewing procedures for ship identification and safe passage through the neutral zones. "Your fleet maintains very tight formations," Kethron observed, studying human tactical displays. "It suggests you expect to fight in coordinated groups rather than individual ship actions?" "We learned that lesson fighting pirates in the early days of our expansion," Julie explained. "We realized that cooperation and coordination could offset disadvantages in individual ship capability. A group of weaker ships working together can defeat a single stronger ship if they fight smart. That is not how the Empire trains its commanders. We emphasize individual ship excellence. Each captain is expected to be capable of independent action. Different philosophies, neither is wrong. They just reflect different historical experiences." Julie pulled up a tactical scenario. "What if we combined approaches, your individual ship excellence with our coordination techniques?" Kethron's skin shifted to interested gold. "That would be formidable. Are you suggesting joint exercises?" "Why not? We are not enemies anymore. We should learn from each other. Plus, if anyone else threatens either of our territories, having experience working together could be valuable. I will propose it to my superiors, though I suspect some will resist the idea of learning from humans." Julie smiled. "And some humans will resist learning from Valtherans. Pride is not unique to any species, but the smart ones will see the value." On Earth, Fleet Commander Jacob Hayes presented his assessment to the Human Government's Security Council. The room was filled with civilian leaders who needed to understand the new strategic situation humanity faced. The immediate threat from the Valthuran Empire has passed, Jacob began. They are honoring the treaty and have withdrawn forces from disputed areas. However, we face new challenges. What kind of challenges? Asked the council chair. Success challenges. Other species see what we accomplished and want our help achieving the same. We are receiving requests for military advisors, technology sharing, even direct intervention in some cases. We need to decide how involved we want to be in galactic politics. What do you recommend? Jacob considered his words carefully. We should help where we can, but carefully. We did not fight for our independence just to become a new empire. We should offer advice, share principles, maybe provide some technical assistance, but each species needs to find its own path. We cannot fight their battles for them. What about the Valthuran response? Will they see this as us building an alliance against them? They might. That is why we need to be transparent about what we are doing. We should coordinate with the Empire when possible, work through the treaty frameworks we established. The goal is not to replace their empire with ours. The goal is to create a galaxy where empires are not necessary. Back on the neutral zone station, an unexpected meeting took place. The Supreme Arbiter had requested a private conversation with Kyle. They met in a secure room designed for sensitive discussions. Ambassador Morrison, I wanted to speak with you away from official channels, the ancient Valthuran began. What you and your species did has had consequences beyond what either of us anticipated. I know. The treaty was meant to establish human independence. It has become a template for systemic change throughout this part of space. Are you prepared for that responsibility? Kyle thought about the question. No, we never expected to become the example others would follow. We just wanted to be free. But now that it has happened, we have to deal with it. The Empire is changing. Not quickly, but it is changing. Species that would never have dared question our authority now do so openly. Some council members want to crack down, reassert control through force. Others argue we should accelerate the reforms, embrace the new reality. Which side are you on? The Supreme Arbiter's skin shifted through complex patterns. I am old, Ambassador. I remember when the Empire was young, when we genuinely believed we were bringing civilization to barbaric species. Perhaps we were right at first. But over centuries, our mission became corrupted. We began to confuse control with guidance, submission with cooperation. You believe the changes are good? I believe they are necessary. The galaxy is not the same as it was 3,000 years ago. New species emerge. Technology advances. Old certainties become obsolete. The Empire can adapt or it can die. Your species forced us to confront that choice sooner than we would have on our own. Kyle felt something unexpected. Sympathy for this ancient being who was watching their entire worldview transform. Change is difficult, especially when you are changing an institution as old as your empire. It is. But perhaps it is also an opportunity to build something better than what we had, to create real partnerships instead of forced associations. Your species has shown that is possible. With respect, Supreme Arbiter, we showed that resistance is possible. Building something better takes longer and requires more work. We are all still figuring out what that looks like. The conversation continued for another hour. They discussed the practical challenges of managing change, the resistance from conservative factions on both sides, the hopes and fears that the new relationship created. When they finally finished, Kyle had a better understanding of the pressures the Supreme Arbiter faced. As he walked back to his office, Kyle thought about the journey that had brought humanity to this point. It started with a simple principle. No species should be forced to submit to another. That principle had nearly led to war. But it had also opened possibilities that neither side had imagined. A message was waiting for him when he returned. It was from Earth, from the Diplomatic Training Center, where new ambassadors learned their craft. They wanted him to give a lecture on the Valthuran negotiations, to share lessons learned with the next generation. Kyle smiled. A year ago, he had stood in the Grand Chamber and delivered a warning that shocked the galaxy. Now he was being asked to teach others how to achieve peace without war, independence without isolation, change without chaos. He began drafting his response, thinking about what he would tell young diplomats about to enter this complex, dangerous, fascinating galaxy. Understand the principles you are fighting for, but stay flexible on methods. Know your bottom line, but be creative in how you reach it. Prepare for the worst, but never stop hoping for the best. Respect your opponents even when you oppose them. And remember that the goal is not to win negotiations, but to build relationships that last beyond any single agreement. Those were lessons humanity had learned through painful experience. Lessons that came from thousands of years of conflict and cooperation, war and peace, failure and success. Now they could share those lessons with others, help other species find their own paths to freedom. That evening, Kyle met Jacob, Julie, and several other key figures from the crisis for a private dinner. They gathered in a restaurant on the station that served food from a dozen different species. The symbolism was appropriate. To uncharted consequences, Jacob proposed a toast. They all raised their glasses. To uncharted consequences. You know, Julie said thoughtfully, when the Valtherans first used that phrase, they meant it as a threat. They thought consequences meant punishment, disaster. What does it mean now? Claire asked. Kyle considered the question. Now it means possibility, change, growth. We charted a course into unknown territory, and we discovered that the unknown is not always terrible. Sometimes it is just different. And sometimes different is exactly what you need. They talked late into the night, sharing stories and perspectives on everything that had happened. They discussed the mistakes made, the lucky breaks that saved them, the moments when everything could have gone wrong but somehow went right. As the gathering wound down, Kyle stood at the window, looking out at the nebula that gave the station its name. Ships from a dozen species moved through the space lanes, going about their business in a galaxy that was slowly, painfully learning new ways to coexist. Humanity had come to the stars, hoping to find friends and allies. Instead, they found empires and submission, power and control. They could have accepted that reality. Many species had. But humans looked at that reality and decided it was not good enough. So they prepared. They planned. They built capabilities that others underestimated. And when the moment came, they stood firm and delivered a warning. Your actions have ignited uncharted consequences. The Valtheron Empire had been shocked. The galaxy had been shocked. And in the end, even humanity had been shocked by what they accomplished. But the biggest shock of all was still unfolding. The realization that change was possible. That power did not have to mean domination. That different species with different histories and different values could find ways to coexist without someone being forced to submit. It was a simple idea. But it was one that could transform the galaxy. Kyle Morrison smiled at his reflection in the window. Behind him, he could see his colleagues talking and laughing. Beyond the window, the stars shone with the light of billions of worlds. Each one was a potential friend or foe, ally or enemy, partner or rival. But each one was also a chance to build something better. And that was enough. That was everything. What happens now? Jacob smiled. Now we live with the consequences of our actions. We proved we can stand up to the Empire. Now we need to prove we can be responsible members of the galactic community. That might actually be harder. Kyle laughed. Probably, but humans have never backed away from hard tasks. We will figure it out. We always do. They stood together, watching as ships from both human and Valtheron space moved through the station's docking facilities. The two species that had come so close to war were now working side by side, building something new. It was not perfect. There would be conflicts ahead, misunderstandings, challenges. But it was a beginning. And sometimes a beginning was enough. His secure communicator chimed. Jacob Hayes appeared on the screen. You did it. They are backing down. We did it, Kyle corrected. This was always a team effort. Diplomacy backed by credible force. Neither works without the other. What happens now? Now we negotiate. We establish frameworks for coexistence. We prove to the Empire and to every other species watching that humanity can be reasonable but will never be weak. And we hope that the lessons learned here prevent future conflicts. And if it does not? Kyle smiled grimly. Then we do this again. However many times it takes. Because that is what humans do. We fight for freedom. We pay whatever price is necessary. And we never, ever give up. Human fleet held position, not advancing but not retreating. They were confident, prepared, and apparently very willing to follow through on their threats. For the first time in his long military career, Admiral Kethron understood what it meant to face an opponent who had nothing to lose and everything to fight for. The humans had turned their entire civilization into a weapon. Not for conquest, but for defense. And they had done it so quietly, so completely, that the Empire had never seen it coming. The uncharted consequences Ambassador Morrison had warned about were becoming very clear, and Kethron suspected this was only the beginning, underestimating opponents. Kyle stood and walked back to the window. You have 48 hours, High Arbiter. That is how long before the situation escalates beyond either of our control. Use that time wisely. Convince your government that some prizes are not worth the cost. Genthor left without another word. Kyle watched him go, then activated a secure communication line to Earth. Jacob Hayes appeared on the screen. How did he take it? Jacob asked. He is scared but not convinced. The Empire's leadership still thinks they can intimidate us into submission. Then we move to Phase 2? Kyle nodded slowly. Yes. Activate the kinetic platforms. Target selection as planned. Let us show them what uncharted consequences really means. Relay your message to my government, High Arbiter. I hope they relay mine to you. We do not want war, but we will not accept slavery dressed up as law. As Kyle turned to leave the chamber, he could feel hundreds of alien eyes watching him. He knew what they were thinking. Another young species making a bold stand before being crushed. Another example for the history books. Another warning to others about the cost of defying the Empire. But Kyle also knew something they did not. Humanity had been preparing for this moment since first contact. Every human diplomat, every military officer, every political leader had studied the fate of the 17 species that came before. They had learned the lessons. They had made plans. The Valtheron Empire thought they were dealing with prey that would eventually submit. They were about to discover they had awakened something very different. Something that had spent thousands of years fighting itself and learning hard lessons about survival, freedom, and the true cost of both.